Hello everyone, welcome back. If you have decided that it's time to build with AI, in particularly with Azure, you open the Azure portal, or if you have Microsoft 365, you open that also, and you will find that you have Azure OpenAI, Microsoft Foundry, Copilot Studio, Azure AI Services, and more, all there sitting there. So what to do? The decision most teams are really making is about Azure OpenAI, Microsoft Foundry, Copilot Studio. So let's figure it out which one is the right for your problem. What I want to do in this video is cut through that because Microsoft has published an official decision tree inside the Cloud Adoption Framework. And today I'm going to walk through the part that matters for most Azure practitioners, which is when to use Azure OpenAI, when to use Microsoft Foundry, or Copilot Studio. Each of these services answers different questions, so let's figure it out which one answers yours. Before you pick a service, you need to answer a more fundamental question, and it is not what does my company want to build. I would say that instead is how much do you want to own and how much do you want to delegate. And the reason for that is because these three services, Copilot Studio, Microsoft Foundry, and Azure OpenAI, sit at very different points on the ownership spectrum. For example, Copilot Studio, it sits at the top because it has the least code, the least control, and the most delegation. You describe what your agent should do, you connect some data sources, and hit publish. So there is no SDK, no deployment pipeline, and Microsoft handles the orchestration, the hosting, and the runtime. Microsoft Foundry sits in the middle. In this one, you are writing code, you have SDK access or API access, and you also have some infrastructure choices. But the platform handles a lot of the heavy lifting underneath, such as the agent runtime, the models, and the observability. And at the bottom, we have Azure OpenAI as an standalone service. And this one, you have raw API access to GPT and reasoning models, no agent layer, no orchestration primitive, no rack tooling included, just the model endpoint and you. The reason this matters is that picking the wrong layer is expensive to reverse. For example, let's say if you start building a production system in Azure OpenAI, and later you realize that you needed a managed agent state or a threat management, or you need tool orchestration. Then you need to rebuild from scratch because you would need Microsoft Foundry. Or let's say that you started with Copilot Studio and you hit a ceiling on customization 6 months later or a year later. You have to re-architect again. So get the abstraction level right before you write any line of code. Let's start with Copilot Studio because this is the one that most of us commonly dismissed. Copilot Studio is Microsoft low-code agent builder. You create agents with a graphical canvas. I will show you how it looks in a moment. You describe the behavior in natural language. You connect to data sources through pre-built connectors and deploy this agent across different channels such as Teams, web, or any Azure bot service channel. The graphical interface looks like this, and basically Microsoft documentation describes it like a graphical low-code tool for building agents and agent flows. I think it's important to know that this tool is the right for a certain class of enterprise use cases that doesn't need to be harder. Let me give you an example. If your end user is a business team such as HR, finance, or operations, and they need a conversational agent that answers questions from company documents or trigger workflows or route requests, Copilot Studio is the fastest path to production because it integrates with SharePoint, with Dataverse, with Dynamics 365, and it also supports MCP for connecting to external tools. So you don't have to write the agent logic, you just need to configure it. Another requirement is that if you want to extend Microsoft 365 Copilot with domain-specific knowledge and tools, Copilot Studio is the designated platform for that because, as you can see, the docs explicitly mention that. It's the extensibility tool for M365 Copilot. Now let's go to Azure OpenAI, and I think this is where most of us start our AI journey because this is mainly the right entry point for a specific set of requirements. At its core, Azure OpenAI gives you API access to OpenAI's models deployed inside your Azure subscription. So you have access to GPT-4o, GPT 4.1, GPT 5.2, 5.4, embedding models. You also have image generation, audio, everything. All of this available through a standard REST or SDK calls. And what is important about this Azure OpenAI is that it is in your own Azure subscription with your own VNet integration, private endpoints, and also your compliance perimeter. If you're building a product that integrates directly into your application stack and the AI behavior is entirely managed by your application code, then the Azure OpenAI standalone service makes sense. You are calling the API, you're building your own prompt management, your own context, your own retry logic. You control everything basically. And it's also the right call if you have an existing application that already has its own orchestration layer. One important note on the positioning right now about this service. Microsoft has absorbed Azure OpenAI into the Foundry service. So the official documentation now routes the Azure OpenAI overview into the Foundry's model page. So Azure OpenAI is the models provider, while Foundry is the platform that builds on top of it. Finally, Microsoft Foundry is a PaaS platform that sits between Copilot Studio's low-code world and the raw API access of the standalone Azure OpenAI. This is where production engineering is happening. This is the cutting edge in the AI for the Azure world. Let me be specific about what Foundry actually gives you, because they call it the unified AI platform, but that is marketing language. So let's try to understand what it gives you. First, the model access. Foundry gives you access to the full model catalog. You have OpenAI models, Mistral, DeepSeek, and others through a consistent deployment and endpoint model. So you pick the model, deploy it to a Foundry project, and consume it via the same SDK patterns, regardless of which provider you choose. The second thing is AI agents, which is JI already. It's called the Foundry Agent Service. It's in general availability on Foundry projects. The second thing is Foundry Agent Service is in general availability in Foundry projects. And this is not the same as the hub-based preview that we had before. On Foundry, we get managed thread states. We can have tools execution, file search, function calling, and so on. All it's managed by the platform, not by your application code. We have Azure AI Search integration, chunking, vectorization, index management, all directly wired into the Foundry project or directly wired into the Foundry project. We have also evaluations. It's a framework for testing the model quality, safety, performance, and so on. We can run evaluations programmatically or through the portal. And finally, we have observability, tracing, metrics, monitoring hooks that plugs into the Azure Monitor. Now, when do you need this platform? 3 examples. If you need a managed multi-turn conversation state, you need tool execution or connected agents without building all by yourself, this is the right tool. Also, if you are building a RAG application that is managed by an engineer team and needs evaluation, safety, versioning, or observability, this is the right tool. And finally, if you need a single governance surface for all your AI workloads that spans across multiple models and teams, this is the right tool, because we can have multiple Foundry projects per team, and we can have at the hub level RBAC controls and networking setup. A quick note here is that Foundry doesn't replace Azure Machine Learning for custom model training. If you need to train your own model on your own data, manage experiment tracking, or run distributed training jobs, that's Azure ML job, not Foundry. Let me translate this decision tree in some simple use cases. If your business team needs a conversational agent and you don't want to code anything, go for Copilot Studio. If you want to extend the capabilities for Microsoft 365 Copilot with company data, use Copilot Studio. If you have, for example, an application that is calling a model and you manage the orchestration layer, use Azure OpenAI. If you are operating in Azure Government or in a specific compliance boundary, use Azure OpenAI. If you are building a production AI agent with managed thread or tool executions, use Microsoft Foundry. If you are building a RAG application that needs safety or versioning or observability, also use Microsoft Foundry. Or if you are deploying a multi-model strategy, also use Microsoft Foundry. Now, if you need to train your own models with your own data, use Azure Machine Learning. And here's the summary for all this. The decision between Foundry, Copilot Studio, and Azure OpenAI is not about the capabilities comparison, it's more like an ownership, or how much do you want to delegate. Copilot Studio gives you the maximum velocity with minimum control. Azure OpenAI gives you maximum control with minimum platform support. And Microsoft Foundry sits between both. It is a managed platform where engineers write real code, but the platform already handles a lot of the heavy lifting, like the agent runtime or the orchestration. If this helped you, just drop a comment with what is the use case that you are using so far, what is the thing that you like most about Microsoft Foundry, what you don't like. And if you want to see more content like this, subscribe and hit like. Bye bye.